and the heinously ugly. We have a lot to go over with regards to the debates on carbon capture, private property rights, critical infrastructure, and state sovereignty. So this is going to be a power-packed episode, and I'll just say that Chris and I both are feeling very energetic about some of these topics. So hold on to your hats. Before we get too energized, let me read the scripture of the day. And it's going to put us all in our place, Chris. All right. It's 2 Timothy chapter 2, verses 23 and through 26. And it says, "Stay away from all the foolish arguments of the immature, for these disputes will only generate more conflict. For a true servant, I lost my place. Okay. For a true servant of our Lord Jesus will not be argumentative, but gentle toward all and skilled in helping others see the truth, having great patience toward the immature. Then, with meekness, you'll be able to carefully enlighten those who argue with you so they can see God's gracious gift of repentance and be brought to the truth. This will cause them to rediscover themselves and escape from the snare of Satan who caught them in this trap so that they would carry out his purposes." And of course, I was reading this morning. It's such a good word. And as I was reading it, it was reminding me of those two seemingly contradictory statements or instructions in Proverbs chapter 26, 4 and 5, which in one case instructs us to not answer a fool according to his folly, lest we become like him. And then immediately goes on to say, "Do not let a fool go unanswered, lest he becomes wise in his own eyes." So I think what we can pull from that is that the scriptures want us to have discernment into where we wade into disagreements and how to handle these tough situations. 2 Timothy 2 gives us help with how to discern that by saying that we should stay away from the foolish arguments of immature believers. The immature he's referring to are the believers. So we are supposed to have patience with those who are immature in Christ because they need to be brought to the truth so they can walk in the purposes that the Lord has for them. But this is not the same strategy. This is not the way we're meant to handle situations with everyone, because later on in the next chapter, Paul is talking about those who infiltrate the body of believers to bring corruption and sin. And they are to be handled very decisively and very differently in order to protect the vulnerable. So my encouragement to us today is, let's not be drawn into conflict. Let's not be quick to react, but instead, let's take a breath, discern where the person's coming from and how the Lord would have us respond, because it's very easy, especially when in a legislative session when tensions are high and the stakes feel very high, to be drawn in to these kind of reactive, unfruitful conflicts.
Yeah, so true, Danielle. And it can be so difficult sometimes to maintain equilibrium
Yeah.
when there are things flying back and forth everywhere and emotions are high because everybody wants what they want and they want to defeat what they don't want.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to fail. And,
And people don't know how to fight clean, you know?
people do not, and that's one thing that I've noticed, and I'm sure that I've mentioned this to you before. Since I got involved in political advocacy, it just absolutely blows my mind the extent to which petty arguments and petty disagreements among people who are supposed to be on the same team often undermine the effort. And that's why I think St. Paul's words and his admonition to be discerning about how we respond to issues like this, because we always want to be responding in a way that lifts people's spirits, that lifts their hopes, and also advances the effort that we're all
Yeah.
engaged in. It doesn't matter if you win some little petty internecine battle with a fellow advocate or someone who's on Facebook saying something that may irritate you. If you win that battle, but it doesn't move the needle, it doesn't move the ideological needle, it doesn't help
Yeah.
anything or anybody,
Yeah.
except you get a fleeting moment of vain satisfaction knowing I told him or I told her. And we have to resist those urges. And
Yeah.
I cannot tell you the number of times I see things, Danielle, on Facebook or on other social media where my initial gut reaction is I just want to hammer this person into the ground because it's so annoying what they're saying. But you have to reflect and think and then respond in a way, A, that you hope is educational and informative, and B, not in a way that either demeans them or undermines the effort, the ultimate objective of what we're trying to accomplish. And
Yeah.
there's no manuscript. This doesn't come with a manuscript. It really doesn't.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's true.
it's
And Chris, it's very easy so when let's say we're in a battle over a piece of legislation, there's the truth about what's going on, there's the truth, there's facts and positions, and then sometimes whenever you just try and speak the truth, people start, if they're caught on the back foot, they may make it personal. And that's very frustrating,
Oh
because
my
it was
gosh,
not
yeah.
personal. It was not personal. This is a debate about issues. And the same is true. I think well, I kind of lost my thought on it, so maybe we should just let it go there. But I, I think it should not hold us back from speaking the truth about the issues of the matter in any way, shape, or form. However people choose to devolve it or take it from there, how we receive things is our own issue. How, what we put out there is what we're responsible for. So if as long as we're speaking the truth, as long as we're coming at these issues from a perspective of wanting to advance the truth, the cause of liberty for the right reasons in the right way, I mean, that's all we can really manage.
Yes, and Danielle, one thing that should give our listeners, and it certainly gives me some consolation, is that most of the time, the vast majority of the time, when people are engaging in these petty arguments or bickering or disagreements on social media, most of the time it really doesn't even warrant weighing in. Most of the time, it doesn't even justify any type of a response. We just have to continue to put the truth out there based on the facts and based on the record in a way that is uplifting and edifying and hopefully brings people into the fold and convinces people and educates people on things that are really important. But the rest of it just doesn't matter. We're not going to be held accountable when we face Jesus for how many Facebook arguments we won
Well, we
or
may
how
be held accountable, but I don't think it's gonna go the
okay,
same way we
yeah, this
thought.
is going to go the same way. We're going to be held accountable for who we directed to Christ, who we educated, and the good that we did to try to advance the kingdom of God on earth. And that's what we have to always remember. And
Yeah,
it's easier said than done, which is why it requires, as getting back to St. Paul, prayerful daily discernment.
it does. It does, and we're not gonna get it right every time.
Not at
And
all.
there's grace for when we don't, but
Thank God for
it's
that.
this is just a great reminder in a time where tensions are running high and people are trying to get a lot done in a compressed period of time.
Absolutely. And Danielle, we'll get into this a little bit, but speaking of tensions running high, sometimes the tensions run high among the legislators themselves. When someone's pushing a bill and there's a committee member, and there were a couple of occasions this week where I observed that and saw that when things got pretty personal on
Yeah.
some bills down there.
I thought
Um,
so too. I thought there were some really nasty moments, and they probably deserve to be called out on that. We may do that when we get to it. But why don't we start, Chris, with what has happened since Tuesday? So Tuesday on the House floor, the cockroach had its moment in the sun, and it did pass.
the
It
co-
passed.
the cockroach HB 519 passes the House in a 73-28 vote, the bill that will criminalize talking on a handheld cell phone in your vehicle. And where do we go from there with this government overreach? Fortunately, Danielle, a couple of things on this bill because of a lot of pressure from us and from other people as well. It is no longer a moving violation, so it won't go on your insurance record and drive your insurance rates up. And secondly, there were a lot, 28 Republicans, 26, 28 Republicans, staunch Republicans who voted against it. But nonetheless, it passed. And I think in large part it passed because it is part of Governor Landry's insurance reform package. And people just, even though his approval rating is abysmal at this point, they don't want to buck him. And so that's yeah.
Calling it insurance reform and it being insurance reform are two different things.
Yes, because this will do absolutely nothing to
Yeah,
reduce our insurance rates in Louisiana.
and
Nothing. And you heard it here on the State of Freedom. When your
that's true.
insurance rates do not go down one bit because of this bill, and yet it leads to increasing government overreach, when they next come in and say that no passengers are allowed to ride in the front seat of your vehicle anymore, or they come in and say that you can't even use a hands-free device in your vehicle because of quote distracted driving. And when you see police officers now engaging in pretextual stops and infringing on your freedom even more based on pretexts, you can remember that the State of Freedom warned against this precedent. And that's exactly what we are doing. This is a very, very bad bill that's going to lead to some serious unintended consequences and maybe some intended consequences. But the bill's not over yet, Danielle. It's still got to go through the Senate. And I know that there are some people who are hard at work to try to defeat this on the Senate side.
And I hope
Yeah.
it gets defeated, Chris, because I was just having this little debate in my own mind about, well, if it passes and it's super weak, then at least maybe they won't bring it back, but they will bring it back. They will bring back bills that amend the language of this to further restrict our liberties. And that's what this is about. The legislators in the state of Louisiana, not as a blanket comment, but we can say with bringing bills like this, want to restrict our liberties. They don't believe in free will. They don't believe in freedom and autonomy. And I would like to think that Brian Glorioso does believe in those things, but this bill speaks the opposite to me.
Well, I mean, his platform when Glorioso ran, as you pointed out last time, was
Yeah.
"Make America Great Again."
Make
And
Louisiana great
I'm
again.
sorry, make Louisiana great again. And so this is not a step in that direction. It's a step
No.
away from it. And what people have to remember, Danielle, is that the government, all the government knows how to do is increase its own power. The government never, once it gets a foothold, it never voluntarily relinquishes power. It
Yeah.
always moves in the direction of tyranny, always moves in the direction of increased power and control over people's lives, which is exactly why this bill, if it is passed and signed, is going to lead to further infringements of freedom. There's
Yeah.
no question about it. The law cannot protect every person in every situation from the consequences of their own freedom. And as one of the great founding fathers said, he who would sacrifice essential liberty for temporary security deserves
Deserves
neither
neither.
liberty nor security.
Yeah.
We have to understand that there are going to be tragedies, there are going to be things that we can't control in life. But the fundamental obligation of government is to secure, protect, and preserve freedom,
Yeah.
not to babysit Louisiana citizens who want to talk on a handheld cell phone when they're driving their car,
Yeah.
most of whom can do it very responsibly. And so, it's the precedent of this that is so dangerous. We have to keep fighting, and we have to fight until the end on this. And hopefully there'll be some smart people on the Senate side who understand how dangerous this is.
Yeah.
This
And
is
we
a
have,
revenue harvesting bill, by the way, Danielle. This is
yes, it
not about
is.
safety and freedom. This is about money, revenue harvesting for the
Yeah.
government.
And you know what? I can take revenue harvesting seriously whenever I see the government taking spending cuts seriously.
Amen. Do a real Doge, and you'll save 10 times the money that you're going to be getting off of these stupid traffic stops where you're citing people for talking on a cell phone.
Yeah. And we have John in the chat who's left a comment about our scripture reflection. He said we've also seen situations where people are getting so beat down already that it's unnecessary to weigh in. Pick your battles with wisdom. Yeah, it's not. We shouldn't be piling on to people in
Oh,
those
John is
situations.
right. John, I love that comment. And you know what that reminded me of? I think it was the poet Longfellow, who said, Danielle, that if we had a private microscope, a private camera into the lives of everybody who we think is our enemy, we wouldn't have any enemies
Mm,
because we would be filled with compassion and love for probably a crippled and broken spirit and soul.
wow.
And, you know, and we wouldn't have any enemies. So we just have to remember that everybody is dealing with things, even the people that we don't like. And
Yeah.
probably if we could see what's really going on inside of them, the last thing we would want to do would be to kick them while they're down. So
Yeah.
John's comment is so timely
Yeah.
and important.
Awesome. Well, Chris, moving on to the other bill that got heard, well, I think there were probably plenty, but the ones that we're going to highlight, House Bill 528 by Ryan Boriak was also debated on the House floor on Tuesday. This is his DOTD restructuring, and I believe it passed unanimously, which means that literally every person in the in the in the House understands that the state of the department is not serving the people. And you know why this is just a really beautiful example of the legislators need to feel the same level of pain that the rest of us feel, because that's how we're going to get meaningful legislation passed. If and until they feel the pain of the average citizen, they're not going to operate in our behalf in large measure. I'll say there are notable exceptions in the legislature, but that's my perspective on this. They also can't drive down the road with a cup of hot coffee because they will get it spilled all over their shirt, tie, lap. And I believe it was Alan Seabaugh who told us a couple of years ago that he lost the entire um, what
Tailgate
is that thing called? The tailgate of his
of
car,
his
because
truck.
it completely fell off of his truck because of the condition of the road. So people get that the DOTD is not serving anyone right now except for the slow as molasses, very ineffective contractors that they have contracted with. And Chris, you and I need to talk about some of those bills. I know I said it last week and then we haven't picked up on it, some of those bills that are talking about contractual obligations, because we cannot let the people who are currently contracting and running years behind schedule continue to have any right, any voice, any ability to bid in any state contracts ever again.
Yeah, so you're saying that you're saying that there should be uh, very explicit debarment provisions
Yes.
when it comes
Yes.
to these
That's my
contracts.
favorite word of this session. That's my favorite word you taught me so far this year.
In other words,
Debarment.
yes, in other words, there comes a point where a contractor loses his or her right to contract with the
Yeah.
state due to either colossal incompetence or corruption or delays, that they just lose the right to contract with the state.
And I
And
would even go further and say that it's not a right, it's a privilege. And
yeah,
and
it's a
you
privilege.
and your obligation as a contractor, as a contract yeah, is to literally fulfill the obligations set forth in the contract. And
Yeah.
if you can't, then maybe you need to find another line of work. Unless there, I mean, of course there's always exceptions, but right now we only have exceptions and we have no one completing contracts on time, is how I feel down
Exactly, because
here on the bayou.
yes. So Hodges has a bill, and we'll talk about this on another show, these DOTD bills, Danielle, but Valerie Hodges has a bill to create incentives to be efficient, timely, and disincentives not to.
Yeah.
And then Boriak's bill that you mentioned, which streamlines divisions within the DOTD. And really, the goal of the bill is to make DOTD more efficient, more responsible, and more responsive to
Yeah.
the public. So, you know, there's always something, Danielle, no matter what day and age we live in, there's always some issue that all Democrats and all Republicans can agree on. And
Yeah.
the condition of DOTD and our roads in Louisiana apparently is one of those issues.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go on to some of the committee hearings from this week. First up on Tuesday was House Commerce. Daryl Desautel's proposed constitutional amendment to increase the membership of the Public Service Commission was supposed to be heard on Tuesday. But it's bumped in the schedule to next week on the 13th.
Yeah, that's HB 364 by Deschantel, which will increase the size of the Public Service Commission from 5 members to 7 members, and the 2 additional members would be appointed by the governor. And it is a constitutional amendment, which means if it passes 2/3 both houses in the session, it goes to the people in a statewide vote. And I just don't think, Danielle, that there's any appetite. We'll be following it. We'll be opposing it
Yeah, the
vigilantly
whole way.
the
Yeah.
whole way through. But assuming it gets to a statewide ballot, would be opposing it then as well, because I don't think there is any appetite among the citizens of Louisiana for increasing Governor Landry's power, particularly with respect to a commission that is so powerful and does so much in the state of Louisiana. I just don't think that that's going to be. I don't think they're going to. Danielle, I do not believe in pure democracy, because I think there's the tyranny of the majority that John
Yeah.
Stuart Mill warned us about. The 51% majority can be just as tyrannical against 49% as a king can be
Yeah.
against the entire population or a group in the population. And that's why we live in a constitutional republic where fundamental rights are recognized apart from whether a majority approves of those
Yeah.
rights or not. That's why it's so important. But I am sometimes I say, my gosh, I wish I could snap my fingers and just have the voters in Louisiana vote on this issue directly, like happened on Constitutional Amendment 2 and on others, because the voters seem to get it right so much more often than our legislators do. It's like they see things in a much simpler way. And really in a much more just way, often than the elected officials who walk the halls of the state legislature. So I have great confidence in the citizens of Louisiana when it comes to issues like the one involving the Public Service Commission, and I think it's dead on arrival.
Yeah.
In light of the current political climate in Louisiana.
And I just want to underscore that this is yet again another example of the expansion of government rather than the shrinking of government. Why do we want 2 more appointed, fully paid cush jobs in the state? I haven't seen one cut yet. Have you?
Exactly. And where's the push for this coming from?
Yeah.
Where's the push for this? Like you
Yeah.
said, it's going to be fiscally draining. We have to pay 2 more public employees in Louisiana. It increases the power of the executive branch when that's the last thing we need to be doing.
And everybody else who has this job had to run for it.
Exactly. And why not? If you want to be on the Public Service Commission, wait till someone times out or run against somebody.
That's right.
That's the way it should be done. So this is not a good bill, and maybe it's a good sign that it was kicked, Danielle, from the committee.
Yeah.
Maybe that means the votes aren't there
Yeah.
to get
I
it
hope-
through. We'll see.
I-
But we're
I
following
hope-
it close.
I hope that it just, curls up and dies. All
Yeah,
right.
like
Next
the
up.
cockroach bill.
Yeah, as if it was a cockroach, huh? All right, House Bill 386. This one is Representative Raymond Cruz's bill that would establish gold and silver as legal tender, as transactional currency, rather. And Chris, I don't remember if you were able to be in the meeting. I know there was a lot going on Tuesday morning, but what I can say is the way that the legislators in that committee handled themselves was an absolute disgrace by and large. I will say that Representative McCormick stood out to me as the sole representative who made any sense, who was thoughtful at all, and who understands that the people deserve to make their own choices. You were talking, Chris, with regard to the cell phone bill, I believe, about the people being able to handle making their own choices and dealing with the consequences of those choices. The legislators in the Commerce Committee are in full opposition to that very concept based on the way that they handled themselves and the way that they were so rude and so demeaning to Representative Cruz and to his key witness, who was Mike Carter, who we've had on the show, I believe, last year from Economic War Room.
Yeah.
It was embarrassing.
Yeah, who knows more about gold and silver as transactional currency, how it works, and how beneficial it can be than anybody on that committee. To be honest with you, I had the thought, Danielle, that with the exception of a couple of those members, I was like, how are these people on a state commerce committee?
Yeah,
They
they
don't
don't
really.
even understand how business works. They don't understand how freedom of choice works, consumers' choice.
Exactly. And people have a right to make bad choices.
Yeah.
People have a right to make
Just
good
let us
choices.
just let us make the bad choice if we want to.
Exactly.
The obtuseness. I'm sorry, Chris. This just gets my goat, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but
Mm-mm.
they are standing there saying, "Well, the price of gold could go down." Well, no kidding. No freaking kidding. Yes, it can go down. Yes, it can go up, just like anything else. Do you think that the value of your car stays the same? Do you think the value of your house stays the same? Do you think that the prices of your manicures are not going to go up and down? Well, they're probably not going to go down. They're probably just going to go up. But why? Why do they think that they can say, well, nobody in Louisiana needs this because the price could go down?
Yeah. So, and we have to protect people from the consequences of a fluctuating market,
Because
and
they're too stupid to manage their own finances.
manage their own finances. So we have to babysit, and we have to make sure that we are the guardians of the people with respect to their own liberty and their own choices. And that's not the function of government. And I was just quite shocked that with some of the questions that were being asked in there. 9 out of 10 Louisiana citizens want gold and silver backed by the state as a transactional currency in Louisiana. It's overwhelmingly popular. And that committee should have done the will of the people and passed that bill through committee.
Yeah.
And they didn't because of concerns that gold and silver, the value of it may go up and down slightly, forgetting that the value of the fiat dollar is steadily going down, and yet gold and silver tends to hold its value so much more than the dollar. It is unbelievable. But the point is, the bill was voluntarily deferred by Representative Cruz, and I think that he is going to bring a substitute bill that would amend Senator Abraham's bill from last year. Senator Abraham's bill from last year established gold and silver as legal tender in Louisiana, and Representative Cruz would amend that bill to provide that gold and silver shall be recognized as transactional currency in the state of Louisiana. So
Yeah.
while it would not have official backing by the Treasurer's Department, it nonetheless would recognize gold and silver as transactional currency, which is a step in the right direction. But it would not allow a depository, and it would not allow the state treasurer to set up parameters within which it would operate. But it's like these people never want to, often don't want to do anything that just reflects the simple will of the people they were elected to represent. And that's what's unfortunate. And I did not like at all the way a couple of the reps treated Mr. Carter.
Yeah.
Acting as about his background and are you qualified to be here? And I mean, those questions were just absolutely demeaning, particularly coming from people who have no idea how any of this works.
Yeah.
And why they're on a commerce committee is extraordinary. I mean,
Yeah. I honestly wanted to start. I would like to approach Speaker de Villiers and ask him to reconstitute that committee because it was that embarrassing. I mean, some of the questions that were asked are just astoundingly stupid.
like the question about, but what if the value of gold fluctuates?
Yeah.
It's like, are you kidding?
Well,
It's
and
kind of it's a joke.
two other points on this, Chris. Well, you mentioned that it wouldn't allow for, but really it wouldn't provide for, right? The depository and the treasurer's involvement.
Yes,
So
correct.
meaning that that could happen at a later date. The other thing I wanted to mention was I was really disappointed that Treasurer Fleming was traveling. He was unable to make it. He is so well versed on these issues. He comports himself so well in those settings. He sent a representative from his office who just wasn't really as read in on the subject matter. And I think Treasurer Fleming would have done a better job,
Yeah.
frankly, of handling those objections.
Yeah, the representative from the treasurer's office, did the best she could,
Yeah.
but was not really particularly prepared to answer some of the questions that Dr. Fleming could have answered very easily. The same questions, by the way, Danielle, that they asked last year.
Yeah.
You could have just played a retape of the same questions they asked last year about the bill. So
And
apparently they didn't listen to the answers.
the other thing I wanted to mention, Chris, is that this is all because of the bankers. I don't think that any of these legislators have an axe to grind on any of this. I don't know that they would have showed themselves to be as ignorant as they did if they weren't under pressure from the bankers in a serious, serious way.
Sure.
And
And
and the
Representative
and
Abear, Danielle, Representative Abear said just that.
yeah,
He said, in the interest of full disclosure, I've had several bankers contact me about opposing the bill, and he actually said that. So it's the bankers versus the average, ordinary Louisiana citizen on
yeah.
this bill. And this committee is siding with the bankers and coming up with some awfully stupid reasons and stupid questions to try to justify it. That's what's going on here.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll get off the soapbox on that one for now, but we will be supportive of Representative Cruz's um, bill.
Substitute bill, yeah.
Substitute bill? Yeah, and we expect him to be able to bring that back in the coming weeks, maybe even as soon as next week.
I
Although
think so.
I would hope that he'd get a little bit longer break from the Commerce Committee than that.
He needs it.
Yeah, he should be on it. Good grief. All right. House Natural Resources and Environment met on Wednesday. This is the CCS stuff. And they had a pretty full agenda, Chris. I know you testified in favor of a bill for that one. Why don't we start with House Bill 601 by Representative Brett Guyman? He brought this bill back because of a tie, I believe, and this
Yeah.
one was his bill on eminent domain. Would you remind us what this one's about? Because there were so many variations on this bill that
Yeah.
that have been heard.
This is a great and encouraging story that should buttress grassroots advocates, Danielle, because it shows what can happen when the people rise up and when the people let their legislators know how they feel. HB 601 was heard on April 29th in Natural Resources, and that bill by Brett Guyman would completely repeal what's called eminent domain for carbon capture pipelines on private property. In other words, 100% of the owners in interest or the affected property owners would have to agree to allow carbon capture pipelines on their property. That's what his bill would do. It failed last week because in an 8-8 tie, because a number of Republicans voted against it. Well, our group, LeCag, State of Freedom, and others went on a basic rampage on that, with tens of thousands of people responding to our social media when we posted a graphic of these Republicans who voted against that legislation and other legislation. Well, it was a little bit different venue when Representative Guyman brought his bill back yesterday or a couple of days ago.
Some tails between the legs.
Some tails between the legs, and 3 Republicans who we had exposed changed their vote and voted in favor of Brett Guyman's bill, and I want to give them credit. Representative Jacob Landry switched his vote, Republican. Representative Tim Kerner switched his vote. Beautiful. And Representative Tim Kerner and Representative Jason DeWitt, all 3 switched their votes, and that made the difference. So HB 601, repealing eminent domain for carbon capture pipelines, passed through House Natural Resources Committee yesterday with a substantial margin and now goes to the House floor. Huge victory, which really is evidence that grassroots advocacy works. And I do, Danielle, want to give some credit to Representative Marcus Bryant, the Democrat, who is on the House Natural Resources Committee, who voted in favor of Representative Guyman's bill, both when it came up the first time and yesterday. So a special nod to Democrat Representative Marcus Bryant for understanding the importance of private property. And we're going to be pushing and working hard with Brett Guyman. And Brett Guyman said, and it's worth quoting him on this, saying, "Our Constitution says that people have the right to say no. It protects people's right to say no." And in fact, he's right. So congrats to him and to the Republicans who came on, who switched over and came on board, regardless of the reason.
Yeah.
but I noticed a distinctly different feel in the Natural Resources Committee this week.
Chris, do you happen to have in front of you the list of people whose votes did not change?
I know who they are. Orgeron, Domain, Reiser, Zerang, Jacob Broad. Those are basically the five who continue on everything. Now, okay, this is important to point out. There's one representative on that committee who was there for every vote and voted against every single carbon capture sequestration bill that came down, and that was Jessica Domain.
My representative. You would call that a double down, huh?
Yeah, her and Neil Reiser.
Okay.
Zerang always voted against it while he was there. Jacob Broad always voted against it while he was there, and Orgeron while he was there. But Jessica Domain was both vocally opposed to all the CCS bills in committee and voted against every single one, and seemed to take a certain amount of pride in doing it, based upon my own observation. So, Neil Reiser, at least, is respectful. He asks questions. He understands. Everybody knows where he's coming from. But I think Jessica Domain took a certain element of personal pride in doing what she could to defeat this legislation that is so important to the citizens of Louisiana when it comes to our fundamental private property rights. And I'm so thankful that I had a chance to testify in favor of these bills on behalf of LeCag. And I'm very happy about HB 601.
Yeah. And Chris, I know we have a clip of your testimony. Was it of that bill or of a different one?
The one, it was of HB
396,
396, which is a similar bill. This bill would have repealed eminent domain for the injection wells, and they couldn't bring themselves to vote the same way on this one as they did on Brett Guyman's bill, because I guess the pressure on them from industry was just too much. So what happened was several Republicans just were not there.
Left.
Were not there for the vote. They were just absent. And that's the reason, Danielle, why LeCag exists. They think, okay, well, we can't vote for it. We can't vote against it. So we're just going to go hide somewhere and act like nobody knows we're not here. Well, we know that you weren't there. Okay.
Yeah. And you get as much ignominy as those who voted against it, because ultimately it netted out the same result. Do you think they didn't show up because pressure was too high from industry, or do you think they didn't show up because it was Danny McCormick and they love to oppose Danny because he is for the people and the people love Danny?
No, I think they didn't show up because they want because of industry. I guarantee it was because of industry, and because if it was because they opposed him, it would be, this is 396. Is this 396, right? Yeah. If it was because they were personally opposed to him, they would have been there attacking him from the committee. And he gave very compelling testimony when he presented his bill. He talked about the fact that people have exactly the way Guyman talked about it, but he talked about the fact that people deserve the right to self-determine what happens with their property, and the industry's pushback on that was, well, they're going to be given money for it, and he's like, well, what if money's not what they want? What if they just want their property? Exactly. So Zerang was absent for this vote, and Kerner was absent for the vote. I think one other. There were several Republicans who just weren't there. Yeah, and it's too. This kind of thing is too important not to show up and vote for. Yeah, when it comes to private property rights. So yeah, I loved testifying on this bill. And why don't you want me to roll the testimony? Sure. Okay, here we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Alexander, LeCag, Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group. I won't be long. We represent citizens across the state of Louisiana on issues that directly affect and concern them. And on these carbon capture sequestration bills, over the last 5 days, I think we've gotten about 80,000 or so views and exposure on our social media. And every single one of them, 99% of them, is opposed to eminent domain for purposes of carbon capture sequestration. I'm talking about people across the state. And we believe deeply in the right of private property. It's fundamental. Our country, none of us would have an opportunity for success in this country if it were not for foundational principles of private property. Now, the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution does provide a right of eminent domain for the government, and our founding fathers believed in it when it is a critical public need for critical public infrastructure, for bridges, for waterworks, that sort of thing. But not for an experimental science that is unproven and in all likelihood very dangerous. And when you're talking about imposing these kind of changes on the state, passing a law that allows private corporations to seize private property for carbon capture sequestration, and it flies through this body in a 36-0 vote in the Senate and a 99-0 vote in the House with absolutely no debate. I've heard more debate in this committee room today about the merits of carbon capture sequestration than occurred when this bill was passed in 2020. And I want to applaud Senator McCormick for having the humility to say, I made a mistake. And I would humbly suggest that perhaps more members of this body should acknowledge publicly when they make mistakes that hurt Louisiana citizens. So I support Representative McCormick 100% on this legislation. You can do whatever you want with carbon capture sequestration, but don't do it on people's property if they don't want it, and don't do it with our money. With those two conditions, have at it. Do all the CCS you want. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was nice, Chris. Well done.
Well, I think that really that reflects the view of the overwhelming percentage of citizens in Louisiana, Danielle, and the vote on this, because of the same Republicans, is reflective of what we were talking about earlier, the failure too often of our elected officials to do the will of the people, because there are just as many people in Louisiana who oppose this carbon capture sequestration property seizure as they do support making gold and silver transactional currency.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I was privileged to be able to represent the people, and I know that we are on the right side of this issue.
There's no question about it. And I noticed that the gentlemen sitting next to you at the table were wearing bright green shirts in support of the bills. And they were, I believe the word said, "We the people." So
We the people.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's offensive to me that this committee would choose to vote against "We the people." But we've seen this. This is not the only time they've done that. Not even the only time this week.
No, it's not the only time this week, but the people ultimately, Danielle, are going to win. We're going to win on the issue, and maybe it's at re-election. We'll see. But so it was a split verdict yesterday on the bills that we were pushing and supporting, and so we'll take what we can get when we can get it.
That's right. Okay, yesterday in House and Governmental Affairs, and we can probably get through this fairly quickly, House Bill 160 by Representative Kelly Dickerson. This is her bill related to ethics complaints. I believe she accepted your recommendation for an amendment on that bill, Chris, but she's taken it back for some more work, it looks like.
Yeah, it's her bill that now requires anybody who files a complaint against someone with the state ethics board to disclose who they are. We think that's very, very important for due process. When someone's accused of something, he or she has a right to know who's accusing them. They don't have a right to hide under this cloak of anonymity. So it's very important. But the concern we had was that people who may be filing a meritorious complaint against a powerful elected official in Louisiana or agent in Louisiana may suffer retaliation for doing so, even if it's meritorious. So we asked her to put in some whistleblower protections for complainants, so
Yeah.
that they're not hammered or retaliated against. And she agreed to do that. Those amendments were added to the bill in committee, but the committee did have some concerns about tweaking on the bill that still needs to be done. And so Representative Dickerson voluntarily deferred the bill and is going to bring it back, and hopefully we'll get that through this session, because there's a lot of sympathy, a lot of support on the committee for it. It's just important when you're making these kind of changes that you do it the right way, and that it's fair to both the accused and the complainant.
And I would imagine that anyone in a position of an official position, whether executive or legislative branch, would be very interested in supporting this, because they all kind of face the same scrutiny. I mean, maybe they don't face the same level of scrutiny, but they stand the same chance, perhaps, of having these a lot of times or potential false claims made against them that cost them a lot of time, personal stress, and money. So I believe even Governor Landry is facing an ethics complaint at the moment. So you would think that he would be supportive of knowing
Sure.
who's bringing that complaint.
And Governor Landry is not a fan of the Louisiana State Ethics Board and the way that they've handled a number of things in the past. Keep in mind, Danielle, also that there is a bill pending in the legislature, and we're not following it particularly closely, but it's by Representative, is it Jackson?
Yeah, Stephen Jackson.
Stephen Jackson, who's bringing a bill to require that all the meetings of the Ethics Supervisory Board are made public and broadcast publicly.
You're so right.
Which would be also a move in the right direction of transparency and accountability from the Ethics Board.
It's pretty rough whenever the Ethics Board is acting, at least under the cover of darkness at best, but potentially corruptly.
Right, exactly. And I think that look, I mean, I think that they have a job to do, and I think there's some good people on there. But we have to get this, do all we can to get this bill by Dickerson through.
Yeah. All right. Next up is another bill that was voluntarily deferred, which I hope they will bring back. House Bill 405 by Democratic Representative Matthew Willard, which would require the Secretary of State to prepare and publish what she's doing with regard to changes in election laws that have been sent to her office.
Yeah. I don't understand, Danielle, why there would be real opposition to this. I have come to the conclusion, based on my own personal observation, that our Secretary of State seems in our legislature to get pretty much whatever she wants.
Yeah.
When she wants something, she gets it. When she opposes something, it's
falls
defeated.
apart. Yeah.
No matter how bad what she's proposing may be, or how good what she is opposing may be. And I don't know whether it's because she controls the levers of the election process. I don't know what the issue is, but the bottom line is that has to change. And it goes back to the fundamental issue of legislative oversight over the executive branch. We got to exercise it, and it includes the Secretary of State.
Yeah, she's operating without any accountability, Chris, and she has been completely defiant in the face of hearing what the people want. The people clearly don't want machines. The people want paper ballots. Now, this will get us into what happened yesterday in Senate Judiciary A, where, in my view, she had to have lied to the entire state in that hearing. Now, maybe that's a bold statement, but I have a really, really hard time believing some of the claims that she made. She went in on Senate Bill 226, Senate Judiciary Committee, to Senator Valerie Hodges' bill, which was simply to protect critical infrastructure, Chris, from any
Foreign adversaries.
Any influence from foreign adversaries or ownership by foreign adversaries.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
that committee just did, I mean, they ripped her apart. There was debate around why would you want the circumference or the distance that this covered by this bill to be instead of 5 miles away from critical infrastructure, 50 miles. Well, the point is, it's a foreign adversary who's not here in the country legally. So why do you care if it's 5 miles, 50 miles, 500 miles? Are you here for the people? Or are you here for the illegals who are here invading our country and buying up our immovable property?
Yes. And there are exceptions in the bill. Her bill would prohibit sworn foreign adversaries of the United States or entities or people associated with those adversaries from buying or acquiring immovable property in Louisiana within 50 miles of a military installation or some other critical infrastructure facility in Louisiana. And instead of Senator Greg Miller and his Judiciary Committee saying, Senator Hodges, this is a very, very good bill. Perhaps we should make it even more strict. Perhaps we should not allow anybody who identifies as a foreign adversary in Louisiana from purchasing immovable property anywhere in our state ever. But instead of doing that, what does Senator Miller do? And other members of that committee, they sit up there and talk about, well, that's a long way. I mean, that's a long way away. That covers halfway between New Orleans and Baton Rouge and this and the other, talking about potential discrimination against people who are trying to dismantle our state and our country. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? These people are enemies of the country, State Department designated. Why are you giving a state senator a problem about prohibiting acquiring our infrastructure within 50 miles of a military installation?
Yeah.
This makes absolutely, and Nancy, and of course, Nancy Landry, included in the bill also, because it's critical infrastructure, was codifying President Trump's executive orders involving our elections, that the Secretary of State has to demonstrate to the Department of Homeland Security and the EAC that these machines that she wants to purchase are not vulnerable to hacking or malicious software or manipulation, and that the component parts of these machines are not being made by a foreign adversary country. These are basic infrastructure things that a Republican-dominated committee should look at and say, 100% we agree with this, and we're going to codify President Trump's executive orders. But what do? They come up with some specious excuse and say, oh, this doesn't belong in this bill or in this committee because this deals with elections, and the other part of it deals with foreign ownership of our land, so it's dual objects, and therefore we can't have it. Well, listen, what makes it fundamentally common issue is that it all deals with our critical infrastructure and protecting it. And that's why it does belong in this committee. But Greg Miller used that as a pretext and as an excuse to strip out all of the provisions regarding these election machines in this bill, this Republican.
Yeah. And Chris, not only that, but it's not just that it's critical infrastructure. It's critical infrastructure as defined by the U.S. federal government. And that's been the case since Obama. Now, I also want to mention—
Talking about the elections, exactly.
Talking about the elections. And the other thing I want to mention is that Senator Seabaugh had an objection before Valerie brought her amendment, which we can talk about that as well. But his objection was so offensive on its face. His objection to the elections piece of it was, well, if we don't buy machines that are connected to our foreign adversaries in some way, which there are only 5, right? She named them: Cuba, Venezuela, China, and North Korea,
Iran, and she didn't mention the Federation of Russia, but they're also on the
So his objection was, well, we can't vote on this. We can't approve this because all election machines are somehow connected to our foreign adversaries. Well, why is that not a problem, Senator Seabaugh?
Exactly.
You would rather say that I can't stand the thought of paper ballots than say, maybe we should not have our foreign adversaries build the machines that select our representatives. That's
Amen.
insane. That is insane.
Yes. And he did say, in a moment of brutal honesty, that if he voted for this, it would lead to an all paper ballot system, which he said was a bridge too far for him. And so and so that's another reason why he opposed it. But the provisions of this bill, 99% of the citizens of Louisiana would read this bill and say, of course we don't want voting machines to use voting machines unless they can be demonstrated that they're not vulnerable to hacking. Of course, we don't want foreign enemy countries manufacturing our voting machines or the component parts that go into our voting machines. Of course, we don't want any of this. Of course, we don't want Nancy Landry to go forward with purchasing $150 worth of voting machines until Trump's executive order
$150 million worth.
$150 million until Trump's executive order ordering a deep dive into the safety of these electronic voting systems by the DHS comes back. And there's a report on that. Of course, we don't want that. But this committee talked about none of that. They were up there coming up with excuses for foreign terrorists who want to buy property in our state close to military installations.
I honestly thought we were beyond that, Chris. Remember, like 2 years ago, we had a real struggle. I think it was with Michael Echols' bill a couple years ago. We had a hard time getting that first foreign adversaries bill passed, and then they both passed last year. So I just thought, hey, we have grown beyond that. We have grown beyond the stupid arguments of, well, what if our foreign adversaries really want to buy property?
Exactly. What do we have to do? What do they have to see to be able to come to the conclusion that the vast majority of Louisiana and American citizens have come to, that there are bad people in this world who are very powerful, who want to destroy our country, disable our infrastructure and our Constitution and our freedom? And you have an opportunity to support a very important bill that would protect our infrastructure, both elections, immovable property, and all the rest, and you sit up there and come up with excuses to oppose it. And that is not acceptable either for the chairman, Senator Greg Miller, or for any other Republican on that committee. You might as well just be a liberal Democrat. You might as well just be a Chuck Schumer, okay, if you're going to act like this. And let me tell you this, Danielle, I have to congratulate Senator Hodges, because she did a fabulous job.
She kept her cool.
She kept her cool, but she was passionate when she needed to be. Also want to congratulate the lady who was there, the election lawyer, and I can't think of her name immediately. She was sitting to the left of Valerie Hodges, and then a gentleman from Florida who was there. All three of them were so eloquent in the way that Cleta Mitchell was the lawyer.
Cleta Mitchell, yes, she's fantastic.
And then
Favorito, what's his name?
Favorito. I can't think of his first name, but he's an election expert out of Georgia. And he was up there warning, if you do this, if you go this route on these machines, you're going to end up just like we were in Georgia. And they're in the process now of decertifying the machines, or one.
But that's the object. That's the clear object then, because they can see it. They had to see it.
Exactly. But they can't claim ignorance of it because the people were there explaining this to them.
Garland Favorito. That's
Garland Favorito is his name. Very impressed with him. So I cannot tell you how disappointed I am that they did not openly and enthusiastically support this legislation. And so basically it moved out of committee
they decimated it.
They decimated it. They took out the provision on the military buying land within 50 miles of the military installations or infrastructure facilities. And they took out all of the provisions related to the elections. So it's limping onto the Senate floor. And at this point, the bill has been gutted so badly that Senator Hodges doesn't even know if it's worth pursuing anymore at this point. It's sad, truly sad.
It is sad. And in normal circumstances, we would say, well, it could live to fight another day, and we could see changes being made, amendments being brought on the Senate floor or in House committees. But with the influence that Nancy Landry seems to wield at the legislature, we really don't have a ton of hope that people will be willing to stick their necks out on this one.
Well, exactly, and I'm starting to believe more and more it's because she controls the levers of the electoral process in the
Yeah.
state of Louisiana. In a
Yeah.
very real sense, their political careers depend upon how she handles the election processes. I don't know what's going on. I'm not saying there's anything nefarious going on necessarily, but
But why
it
should they be so afraid of her? Why sh
exactly.
Yeah. Chris, do you mind if I play her testimony yesterday? Because I think it's so important for the people of the state to hear directly from the horse's mouth what she said. And I think that it'll be very obvious why I don't really have a problem saying that she's lying. Is that cool with you?
Absolutely.
All right, let's play it.
You know, everything that y'all have asked us to do at this point. And so, you know, we've worked with Senator Hodges on some amendments, but I hear your concerns now about dual objects, so it might be safer just to remove us from the bill to not jeopardize the rest of her bill, because we don't think it's really necessary to have anything about elections in this bill. Her concern was with the executive order of the president, which was issued a few months ago or a few weeks ago. We've met with the White House twice now. Yesterday, in fact, I met with White House staff. I met with members of DOJ. I met with Department of Homeland Security and the Social Security Administration. And I've also met with the Election Assistance Commission, which is also their orders in the executive order directed to that agency as well. So, and I have a letter actually from the Intergovernmental Office of the Trump administration saying this order is intended to complement and support your work to improve Louisiana's election system and processes by providing additional federal resources and coordination. They commended us for what we do here in Louisiana, and they encouraged us to proceed with our procurement and get a new system that allows us to have an auditable paper record. And so just adding any more requirements or oversight we think is unnecessary. We already have, this is already the most transparent procurement in the history of Louisiana. It's the most arduous procurement process, I would venture to say, in the country, based on the reaction I got from other secretaries of state around the country when I told them what we have to go through. We've already held a year of hearings. Like I said, everything we do now, we have to follow the APA process, which takes months, as you know. And so there's oversight of both the SGA committee, the HGA committee, the joint Budget Committee has to approve any award we have. We have the Voting System Commission that was created. We have the Voting System Proposal Evaluation Committee that was created. And we also have the Voting System Standards Committee that will certify equipment to Louisiana standards as well. Any more oversight and any more requirements in the law is just going to slow the process down. Both Governor Landry and the Trump administration have asked us how they can help to speed things up. We need to get a new system, and we need to get it sooner rather than later, and we just need to move forward. We don't need any more oversight. We don't we're complying with the executive order. We're already 95% in compliance. All we need to do is get a new system to be in compliance. And so we ask that, you know, you adopt one set of amendments, either the ones that would, you know, make it less burdensome or just take us out completely.
Right. And thank you.
I will immediately demand voter ID, same-day voting, and only paper ballots. Only paper ballots.
And I put that in there for a little bit of contrast because what she's saying does not match at all with what Trump is saying. And I just don't think she's telling the truth, Chris.
I don't think she's telling the truth either, at all.
I feel like you could pick apart a few points that she made.
How can you say that you're following an executive order when you're trying to rush through and buy new voting computers that spit out a computer generated paper component that is not reliable because it's coming out of a hackable voting machine. 95% of the people who vote don't even look down at a ballot when it's printed out to verify if it's right or not. They're relying on what's going on inside that machine. She wants to rush forward and make this purchase when there's an existing executive order right now that has ordered the Department of Homeland Security, in conjunction with the EAC, to do a evaluation of every electronic voting system in the country in order to determine whether or not they are safe, whether or not they are vulnerable to hacking and malicious hardware and all the rest of it. So at the same time that this EO orders that investigation, she's trying to rush the process through before the report and recommendations come back from that EO. So
Yeah.
how is she following? How is she 95% in compliance with the EO? And how is she in compliance with the Trump administration when 2.5 weeks ago, Tulsi Gabbard in a cabinet meeting is on record saying we have evidence not only that these computer generated voting systems can be hacked, we have evidence that they have been hacked. She says that in a cabinet meeting. Is that not enough for Secretary Landry and for Senator Miller to say, maybe we need to slow down this process and wait for this report to come back on this EO? Is it that? But instead, Danielle, and excuse me for going on a rant here.
I wanted you to.
But instead, he sits up there and says, Secretary Landry, has anybody from the national intelligence community contacted you and said that we have a problem with our voting system in Louisiana? Or that we have they done any kind of a threat assessment? Listen, Senator Miller, it doesn't matter.
It's also not incumbent on them to do that.
It's exactly. Can't they expect you to follow an executive order? Can't they expect you as chairman of a powerful Senate committee in Louisiana to know what the National Intelligence Director is saying about the vulnerability of these voting systems? Do they? So does it make any difference whether or not Tulsi Gabbard picked up the phone and contacted Nancy Landry and told her, "Oh, did you see me on the news?"
Chris, can you also talk a little bit about the procurement process? Because I feel like she made a very unfair characterization of the way the procurement process is handled.
This voting system commission, it did absolutely nothing. It sat there, it met for a year. It had expert testimony. Alex Haldeman, who's the preeminent election cybersecurity expert in the world, testified right in front of them that these BMDs, these ballot marking devices, these machines, these computers are all hackable, and they're an attractive target for cyber criminals. And you are vulnerable. And I recommend a secure hand-marked paper ballot system, with the exception of the disabled who are unable to mark a paper ballot. These are dangerous. He sat there right in front of Kyle Ardoin and said that. And what does the Voting System Commission come back with? Nothing. You know what they recommended? A secure hand-marked paper ballot system or ballot marking devices. One of the two. They imposed no constraints whatsoever on the Secretary of State's ability to do whatever she wants to do. And even in the committee, then Secretary Ardoin, who was Secretary of State, then said, I don't know what we're going to do. I don't want to commit to any one system or another. I don't know how we're going to do it. So the commission was a total waste of time, with the exception of Dale Clary, who made some very good points as a member of the commission. But they did nothing. And this voting system proposal committee that it's now supposed to go to, they're all appointed by the Secretary of State. They're all appointed by her office. What kind of an objective assessment do you think? If we can't get objective legislative oversight over the Secretary of State, what kind of oversight are we going to get from a committee that she appoints?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the only way we're going to see real change for this, Chris, is one, federal action. And here's what's in the chat right now. I'm sick and tired of hearing that she's met with Trump officials. Who exactly did she speak with, so that we can validate the statement that she keeps making? Just on that point, I clipped this. Well, Katie clipped it because she's far more advanced at these things than I am. clipped it and put it on Twitter. And if you would like to share it, please go to the State of Freedom profile. It's Freedom State US, and retweet it and tweet it at anyone in the comments that you think would come out, because I want someone from the Trump administration to come out and call her out on this, because she deserves to be called out on it. And also in the chat, it says she has been part of the process. The feds are not going to contact her unless they are charging her with a crime. Well, we'll see how it goes.
Exactly. And it's not their responsibility to do that.
Yeah.
Greg Miller is a guardian of the citizens. She's supposed to be a guardian of the citizens. And the only people apparently at this point in the state of Louisiana who don't understand how vulnerable these voting machines are and these voting computers are in the state legislature. And I don't know what kind of evidence could be put forward in order to convince them. So
Chris,
I don't think, I just don't believe what they're saying.
Well, that's where you and I diverge, because I believe they do understand the vulnerability of the system, and it very well may be why they're there in the first place.
And it may be why they're there in the first place. But the bottom line is, it is a complete misrepresentation for her to suggest that there is any real oversight over what she does or how she does it, because it simply doesn't exist. And what little oversight there is, she tried to gut last year in House Bill 866, which was supposed to be just an 856, which was supposed to be just an innocuous bill doing something very innocuous on the elections. And over on the Senate side, they put all these amendments on it that would have completely gutted the procurement process, would have completely gutted the attorney general oversight over her, and even legislative oversight. What does exist there? And fortunately, because of major backlash on the Senate side, that was killed, that was defeated. Because if that had passed, she would have zero oversight at all right now. So for her to say this song and dance is just completely disingenuous. And I agree with you, Danielle, that there is no way that, in light of this executive order that is very clear in its terms, and knowing what we know about President Trump, there's no way that someone in the intelligence community in the Trump administration told her to go forward and buy these machines.
Yeah.
There's no way.
No. Do you think, okay, so she said she met with people at Doge. Well, do you think people at Doge who are charged with cutting, I think that is government efficiency, right? They're charged with cutting costs. They're charged with finding waste, fraud, and abuse. So do you think the same president who told Governor Landry to his face that he could save a lot of money if he moved to a paper ballot system, it would only cost 8% of what the machine cost would be? Do you think the same president who has this Department of Government Efficiency, do you think that department is out here saying, you know what, Nancy, just go ahead and spend the $150 million and just let us know how it goes?
Yeah,
No.
just let us know how it goes, and then you can upgrade later. You can just upgrade later. And by
That
the
doesn't
way,
even make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And by the way, the head of Doge has said repeatedly, Elon Musk, that you should never use computers to vote, ever, because they can all be hacked. This is a rocket scientist. This is the smartest guy in the world who has repeatedly said you can't trust computers when it comes to your vote.
So
And
I'll tell you.
She's citing Doge?
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple things on that. One is, I think the new machines must be easier to manipulate than the old machines. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be trying to have this switch from that office, right? I think if the machines we have were more easily manipulated than the machines that we could get, then we would be wanting to keep the old machines. I think that stands to reason. It's a fair assessment.
Unless she's convinced, Danielle, unless Secretary of State is actually convinced that a computer-generated piece of paper actually makes our elections auditable, actually makes our elections reliable and secure. If she believes that, then as wrong as she is, maybe she is sincere in wanting to go forward. Because right now we don't even get a piece of paper.
Well, you are far more generous than I am on this, Chris, because I think that she has heard those objections for the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years that our elections are unauditable, and now she's using it to her advantage. Because if she wanted to do something in the last 5 years when she's been in that office, right? She may not have had the seat, but she's been in the office. Then why not say, okay, why don't, whenever you punch the button in these old school machines, why don't you also fill out a paper ballot so we can assure you that your election is auditable?
Exactly.
Auditable. That could have
Why
been
not
done.
Go in and vote on the machine. Go in and vote on the machine, but you also are going to take 45 seconds or a minute and do the paper ballot, and then we're going to sign it, and we're going to put it in the box, and so we'll have a real paper backup then, but not a piece of paper that's generated by the same machine that Alex Halderman said is vulnerable to manipulation and switching of votes and hacking.
Yeah.
And you know what else he said, Danielle? The election officials, it is so subtle and is so sophisticated that even the election officials can't tell that it's being done.
Yeah.
They can't even detect it.
Chris, is the call to action on paper ballots still up on LeCAG's website?
I believe so. Yes, and if we deactivate it, it takes about 30 seconds to reactivate it. Another thing, Danielle, that we do have up, and this is critically important. There is an active call to action up that admonishes, encourages, and demands the Secretary of State not to go forward with any voting system or machines until President Trump's executive order is fully fulfilled and the reports and the findings come back. And so it's titled President Trump's Election Executive Order, and that deals with the elections. That's a critically important one. So please go do that call to action. It doesn't take long to do.
Yeah. The other, I guess, my admonition to our listeners is to treat every single election from here on out as if we need it to be too big to rig. Because I think back to the constitutional amendments, and that in large part should have been a low turnout election. And perhaps it was a low turnout election, but people were so rapidly against those proposals that I think that's the only reason we were able to win the way we did and show decisive victory. Because I don't believe, Chris, that they put all these little tax increases and levies, excise taxes on what they believe will be a low voter turnout election. They put them there, and then they tell us that we all went out and voted to raise our own taxes, which we know we did not do.
It's all by design.
It is. So I believe from here on out, behave as if you need it to be too big to rig until, just always go and vote.
Always play like you're 10 points behind.
Yeah.
15 points behind. Yeah. And I think that's a very fair statement to make, Danielle. But I've got strong suspicions, as you have, that the Trump administration has not given the green light to this, because it would directly contradict an existing executive order. And we know that President Trump knows these machines are not reliable. We know it. He said it so many times. He just said it a minute ago. He didn't say directly, but he said, why do you think he wants an all paper ballot system? If he wanted machines, do you think he would repeatedly be saying how much cheaper a paper ballot system is? No, it's ridiculous. And so it's important for the members of this Senate Judiciary Committee, the Republicans on that committee. I do have to give Rick Edmonds a hats off on this. Senator Rick Edmonds is on the committee, and he made a lot of sense. He was supporting the bill, and so hats off to Rick Edmonds. But Rick Edmonds was just doing his job.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that we live in an age and a climate where you have to commend Republican legislators simply for doing what they were elected to do. But we have to do it because of the contrasting approach of so many of them.
Yeah. Chris, before we move on, I just want to mention some things that are in the chat. Question here. Have you guys taken a look at the meeting agendas posted on the Secretary of State's website? They all look the same, like someone just copied the document and changed the dates.
I have not looked at
I
that
haven't
yet.
either.
I haven't looked at it yet, but I do know that um, a lot of election security people in the state have complained about the lack of communication regarding these public meetings and when these things are supposed to occur and at what stage of the process is the Secretary of State. She's not been fully transparent when it comes
No.
to these issues.
No, absolutely not.
She will post when the vacancy election will be held in a judicial race prominently on her X page and everywhere else. But when it comes to public meetings regarding the procurement process, where the public can weigh in and really give their opinion on what's going on here, it's hard to find it. Why is that?
Yeah, well, I think it's clear why. There's another, I think the question continues. I went there expecting to see some minutes at the very least, but there's nothing. These meetings should have been recorded and posted if she wants to call this process transparent, 100%.
100%. And doesn't that go back to Willard's bill?
Yeah.
And so anyway, we have a problem. We have a problem here, and it's so important for our listeners to understand what it is. And that is basically this, that the narrative that the Secretary of State is painting with regard to the security of our election system in Louisiana is a lie.
Yeah.
And we are vulnerable, acutely vulnerable to manipulation in our system right now. No question about it. And it's gotta change.
Yeah, and it's not just the security of our election in this moment. It's also her intention and the encouragement by the Trump administration to move forward with what we know to be vulnerable systems. So I just think the whole thing's disingenuous. And so we'll be keeping a very close eye on her office, as you said, Chris, and every piece of legislation that should touch it. And that brings me now to a vote that happened on the House floor yesterday, House Bill 577 by Representative Darrell Desautels. This is related to the procurement of voting machines, Chris.
Yeah, and it vests. I testified on this bill in the House Governmental Affairs Committee, and this bill diminishes the traditional competitive procurement process, competitive bidding, and converts to, exclusively, if she wants, to what's called an invitation to negotiate, which was created by way of a bill that the same representative passed last year, allowing the Secretary of State to use either a competitive bid process or an invitation to negotiate, which specifically says that she can extend an invitation to a vendor to negotiate one or more vendors. So theoretically, the Secretary of State could extend an invitation to, quote, negotiate to one vendor that she wants, that she has her eyes on and wants to use. And the bill says that any provisions of the procurement code that conflict with this bill, with this law will supersede. This law will trump the procurement code. So it does vest greater power in the Secretary of State. We made all of these objections in the committee, but it passed out of committee. Now, I do want to remind the listeners that Representative Boyer looked at the Secretary of State in that committee and said, Secretary Landry, we're not in a real rushed process here, are we, to purchase these machines? There's plenty of time for President Trump's election executive orders to play out and to see how that plays out and to see what's found there, right? And that's when she said, for the first time, but we've met with the Trump administration and we've expressed some disagreements with parts of the executive order, and we're working with them on this issue. So she didn't even answer the question about whether or not she's going to wait until the orders that President Trump has mandated regarding.
Because she doesn't want to.
Because she doesn't want to. And she just went into how she's worked. She's trying to make it sound like she is in communication with the Trump intelligence community, cybersecurity community, and working with them, and that they are supportive of. And the letter that she read from yesterday saying that this order is from the Trump administration, this order is intended to complement and support your efforts? Of course it is, assuming that she's doing the right thing, assuming that she agrees with the administration, that these machines are vulnerable, which is the basis of the executive order. Of course, the order is designed to complement your efforts, assuming your efforts are honest.
Yeah. That's a big assumption. This bill passed the House floor yesterday in a 98-0 vote. So someone explain that to me. Someone explain to me why every single member of the House who was present to vote is supportive of Nancy Landry being able to operate unilaterally when it comes to a purchase of this size and to which there is such great opposition.
Because they don't want, for whatever reason, to oppose her. They don't want to do it, or they don't understand what is going on here. So Nancy, so a bill can say one thing very specifically, and then Nancy Landry can sit in front of a committee and state just the opposite, and it's okay. So we're going to roll on through here and go do it, because apparently they're either afraid of her, or they trust her, or they just don't know what's going on here. I don't know what the answer is.
I don't know what the answer is, but a 98-0 is very upsetting to me.
Very much so. And we've done some posting on this. We do not have a call to action specifically on 577, but going over to the Senate side, we got some good people over there who are going to look at this. And by the way, Danielle, I spoke to Senator Facey this morning, and he has given us the authority to talk about Senate concurrent resolution. Is it 26?
Yeah, let's get to that in just a second,
Yeah,
if you don't
okay.
mind, Chris. We'll get through what we expect today, and then I think we'll be there. So we're almost coming to that point.
Okay.
But today in House Governmental Affairs is House Bill 421 is being heard this morning by Emily Chenevert, and this is her bill that would get DEI out of state agencies.
Yes, and it's a really important bill, and I hopefully not a controversial one among Republicans. Just the woke Marxist doctrine and criteria that's being used for hiring and firing and disciplining, and in the public schools all over the place. The diversity, equity, inclusion, the critical race theory, all of the garbage that has permeated the schools and the public agencies, all of that is going to be abolished.
Yeah.
And Emily Chenevert has a good bill here, and it's important to do it, important to go forward. And we have a call to action on it.
Great. And then now we'll be getting into what we expect to happen next week. Now, the schedule for the House and Senate usually comes out Thursday afternoon, Friday sometimes even it doesn't really come out fully until over the weekend. So we don't have that clear of a picture of what's coming, but we have heard, like you said, Chris, from Senator Facey, that he is bringing a Senate concurrent resolution. The number's SCR 26. And this, what would it do, Chris? This is pretty important to us.
It strongly recommends this Senate resolution that Nancy Landry take into account, consider President Trump's executive orders, and does everything within her power to ensure that our voting system is safe and secure. And it specifically mentions President Trump's executive orders in the concurrent resolution. So it's a direct call upon Secretary of State Landry to look at President Trump's executive order with regard to our election system. And it doesn't come out and say specifically comply. The language should be stronger in the resolution, and maybe we can get Senator Facey to make it, but it certainly calls her attention directly to President Trump's executive orders and strongly urges her to take those orders into account in securing our election system in Louisiana.
Well, she shouldn't have any objection to this because she said she's already 95% in compliance.
Oh,
Chris.
yeah. She's 95% in compliance.
All she needs to do is buy the machines and she'll be fully compliant.
Absolutely. It's like, you know, you're compliant with the rules of the road and the Department of Motor Vehicles when you're driving down the road, except for the fact, one small problem, that your vehicle doesn't have any brakes on it. Other than that, I'm fully I mean, I got wheels, I got a motor, I got a steering wheel. I've got everything. I got rear view mirrors in here. I just don't have any brakes, but I'm 95% in compliance.
Yeah. Well, time will tell, Chris, but we will continue the drumbeat. To me, this is the most important issue in our state. This is the existential question, because if we can't get the voting machines right, if we can't be convinced, if we can't be assured that our elections are, in fact, ones of integrity, ones that are auditable, ones that truly reflect the will of the people, then we have nothing. We have absolutely nothing.
And what she wants, to be very, very clear, is not auditable. Just because a computer spits out a sheet of paper does not make your election system auditable.
Yeah.
And it's important to understand that.
Yeah, and I would say it this way. If you're going to make a large withdrawal from the bank and they give you a receipt and a wad of cash, and you can you choose to immediately drive away if you're trying to make a $40,000 withdrawal, or are you going to sit there, let everybody wait behind you and count your cash to make sure they didn't mess up? The receipt could be wrong.
Absolutely, the receipt could be wrong. There's no question about it. And therein lies the problem. And therein is why every cybersecurity expert in the world has said that ballot marking devices cannot be relied upon to be an accurate reflection of a person's vote and their intent. There's not one cyber expert in the world who disagrees with that.
Yeah. Exactly. All right, Chris. Well, that rounds us out for today. I don't know. Do you have any parting thoughts for us?
My parting thought is that I'm fired up. I'm ready to go, ready to continue the fight. And I am so thankful to know that while we're not always on the side of government bureaucrats and even elected officials, we know we're on the side of the citizens of Louisiana. And that is so inspiring, so emboldening to know that we stand on the right side. And all the hosts of enemy are no battle when it comes to the collective will and power of an engaged electorate. And that's where we are. And that's what the citizens of Louisiana are increasingly becoming. And so fortunately, we're on the right team here, Danielle, and it's an incredible privilege to be able to come on here and inform the public about things that really matter. And they do respond because people do care.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I'll just take the opportunity to encourage people, if you're on Facebook, if you're on Twitter, take a few moments, go ahead and give LeCag a follow, give the State of Freedom a follow on all of the platforms that you can find us on. If you can't find us, you can go to our respective websites. There are buttons on there for our social media. You can click through. And by all means, go to LeCag's Action Center and take action on every single issue that's important to you, that's important to your family, your community. And if you would also send this episode to people who need to hear it. And lastly, please go on to Twitter, if you are on there, our X, and amplify that post that with the clip that we showed you from Secretary of State Landry claiming to have been in deep conversations and alignment with the Trump administration. And I really want to make sure that that reaches the far corners of the earth, and particularly DC area.
It is so important, Danielle, you're so right, to share everything we put up. The State of Freedom, LeCag, share it everywhere. Social media is a very powerful vehicle of action and information. So make sure that you do that. And also go on and become a monthly member of LeCag, because when we're down in the legislature, we're battling against powerful special interest groups that have some of these legislators in their pockets because of money. And we are leveling the playing field. So go join LeCAG, become a monthly member of LeCAG, because it helps us to continue to level the playing field on your behalf. And also share, subscribe, support the State of Freedom, and become a member of the State of Freedom as well. Our loyalty, as I've said, Danielle, many times, is only to the Constitution and only to the citizens of Louisiana. There's no place I would rather be. None.
Amen. Amen. All right, folks. Well, we will see you all on Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Hope to see you on the live stream, but if not, you can catch us in all the usual places. We'll be talking to you then.
And Danielle, let me just say this.
Go for it.
I can't guarantee that I'm not going to go on a rant. Have a good
Well-
weekend.
Yeah, you too, Chris. Thank you.